I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.
Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. I just got back home from seeing the new Candyman movie and wanted to get some of my initial thoughts down. I will be spoiler free, so forgive me if some of the things I allude to are obtuse. If you want to watch it, I want you to go in as fresh as possible. I'm just vibing this off the top of my head, having had about half an hour to digest the movie. Two bits of information I should probably get across as early as possible in the video. One, I really liked it. With maybe a couple of caveats, they might get ironed out with a second or third viewing. I'm definitely going to watch this movie again. More importantly, perhaps for those of you who are on the fence, this is not a reboot. I still see it floated around that this is a reboot of Candyman. That's possibly the fault of how the trailer is put together. It does make it seem like that. It's a direct sequel to the original Candyman. It's a very respectful sequel. It's these days you would call it a legacy sequel, and there seems to be a lot of them around these days, especially that have this exactly the same title as the movie they're sequelizing or prequelizing. We've got two The Things, two Halloweens, we've got two Candyman movies. Soon we're going to have two movies called just Scream. This is a legacy sequel that earns its legacy. The passage of time between the original movie, 92 and almost 30 years till now, is integral to the story they're telling. We follow Anthony, who's an up-and-coming, struggling artist, and his partner who curates for an art gallery in Chicago. They have moved into the gentrified now Cabrini Green, the area that used to be the housing projects which were at the heart of the original movie, has now been gentrified. Those housing projects, flats have been pulled down, brand new buildings put up, and lots of swanky new up and coming middle class people moving in. Desirables. Anthony is struggling to produce pieces for an up and coming show, and decides, upon hearing the story of the history of Cabrini Green, to use that as the subject matter for some new work, which hopefully the gallery owner will like. One of the things I particularly like about how this story unfolds is that the story he hears is of Helen Lyle, Virginia Madsen's character from the first movie, not initially the Candyman. I love the fact that Candyman's sort of promise stroke threat to Helen in the first movie, that her tale will be told and retold, has actually come to fruition, and over the passing decades that is the sort of headline standout campfire tale of all the tales of horror and violence that have taken place there. Hers is the sort of jewel in the crown of the campfire stories. As one of the characters, Riley, comments, countless named black people have died violently in Cabrini Green. One white woman comes here and gets murdered, and that's all anyone wants to talk about. It is important to the story that Anthony is an artist. Just yesterday I was talking about Candyman 3, Day of the Dead, and what an absolute wasted opportunity it was having Daniel Robitaille's great-great-granddaughter be an artist as he was, and for them to do nothing with it. This film really dives its hands up to the elbows in that kind of stuff. I'm an absolute mark for films about dangerous art, starting, of course, with most of the oeuvre of Dario Argento. Argento loves his dangerous art. Recently, I would suggest that the remake of Suspiria has a strong streak of dangerous art, dance as spell casting in it. And Candyman 2021 is another addition to that growing subgenre of dangerous art horror movies that just tick so many boxes for me. I'm really glad they got into it. again, it brings to mind the word legacy. Whilst Daniel Robitaille, how shall I say this? I think it's apt that there's an artist at the centre of the movie so that they can explore this idea. I like the fact that you have a black artist and a black gallery curator who throughout the movie there's still gatekeeping going on, mostly by white critics, white gallery owners. There is a black curator from New York as well who does some gatekeeping as well, and essentially tells them you should really make your art about your experience from the hood. One of them even still refers to it as the hood, and the New York curator saying let's put this show together around this specific thing that ties into some pain in your past. And Anthony's told, well, you should really dig into the pain and the history of your community. Being told, yeah, you can create art, but we'll accept you if you create the art that we tell you to create. Tying right back, I guess, to Daniel Robitaille and the portraits he used to do for the great and the good in the white community back in the 19th century. One of the characters here in this film nails it down when he says that they like what we produce, they just don't like us. That really resonated, if you'll allow me, for just a couple of minutes. I remember in the wake of George Floyd's murder, a DJ we have on the radio here, Radio 1, a BBC radio station, Clara Amfo, went on and gave you'll be able to find it here on YouTube, Clara Amfo's very impassioned reflections on the very, very raw events of those few days. And she said something very, very similar. It feels like you want our culture, but you don't want us. I think that's at the heart of Candyman 2021, or at least part of the heart of it. The other part of it is to act as an echo or a counterpoint to 1992's Candyman, which now, especially having talked about part 2 and part 3, is very clearly about a tourist. I called Helen Lyle a poverty tourist from the first movie. She's a white middle class academic going into Cabrini Green and finding out about the urban myths there, and especially of the Candyman, and she brings that back out to her university circle to get published and to have her tell everyone what the Candyman is and what he's about. There's even a section in this new movie where we hear some recordings of her note-taking from the first film where she is literally explaining what the Candyman is. And in this movie, quite rightly, Jordan Peele and Nia DaCosta wanted there to be African-American characters exploring the story of Candyman, not having someone from outside the community come in and tell us. So this is the flip of that. It's almost as if this film is saying, that's what you say Candyman is. This is what we say Candyman is. That might ruffle a few purist feathers. So for a large portion of the film, this isn't necessarily going to be the Candyman you would expect, or maybe even the Candyman you wanted when you bought your ticket to go in and see the movie. It's a Candyman that's worth having, absolutely. If that kind of stuff is going to ruffle your feathers, I suggest you stick with it, because one of the things the new Candyman movie doesn't do is just retread what has come before. It actually expands upon it in a way that I found to be organic, really interesting, that really paid dues and respect to the source material and the original film. There's even a scene in there which could have come A little scene, to be fair, but it could have come straight out of Clive Barker's short story The Forbidden, which Candyman is an adaptation of. So that settled me quite early on. It's like, oh, okay, they're actually really quite serious about the source material, so let's see what new they can do about it. Now that legacy word again, 30 years almost has passed. This is a story about urban legends and tales in the oral tradition that are passed on and change over time. It is only right and proper that Candyman 30 years later is a slightly different proposition, that the story will have changed in the intervening 30 years. I think that's the smart way to go. Without spoiling anything, let me refer to a relatively recent interview I read with Robert Englund, of all people, talking about a potential new Freddy movie and his idea for it. And what he said was, there's absolutely no reason, I'm going to paraphrase, that every kid should dream of exactly the same Freddy. There's absolutely no reason why every nightmare couldn't have a completely different actor playing Freddy, as long as some of the particulars are there. The knives, the stripy jumper, the hat. Freddy doesn't have to look exactly the same in everyone's nightmares. Now we're dealing with stories passed on orally, urban legends. One of the characters in this says, and I'm going to paraphrase again, something along the lines of, you have a little leeway to make the story your own as long as you keep some of the particulars in place. And I think that that's what Candyman in 2021 has done. I will say again, it absolutely honours the original film. It absolutely honours the story of Daniel Robitaille and what Bernard Rose, Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen created in 1992. And now this is our Candyman. I really dug the exploration of that. Let's go with negatives. I mean, it's creepy in parts. There's some stuff in there that I really like. There are some kills I really liked. The way Candyman is presented, I especially like. You only see him in reflection. That's really nice. There are elements of it with the spreading of the story and the legend again, and how Candyman sometimes appears, that really made me think of the J-horror wave of cinema, especially Ring. That is not bad company to be in, ladies and gentlemen. I didn't find it particularly scary, but other people might find it scary. I found portions of it creepy, for sure. I would have liked it to have been scary, but then again, as horror fans, don't we want to find that next film that will scare us? And that's a rare beast indeed. Like the original film, this Candyman has things to say about race and class, amongst other things. I think it's absolutely apposite that there are now behind the camera, producing, directing and crafting the story, people of colour to tell this story, or continue or expand upon this story. It's a great companion piece to the original Candyman. It's like a mirror reflection, I think, on purpose. If you have a creature in this that you summon by looking into the mirror and he appears in the reflection, you're going to have loads of mirror images throughout it, and there are. It looks gorgeous. It sounds gorgeous. The score is great. No one fumbled with the acting. I really want to sit down and watch it again. What I really want to do, I think, is once I own it, I purposefully stayed away from Candyman because that's setting the bar high for a sequel. So I watched 2 and 3. This is clearly, by quite some distance, the second best Candyman movie ever made. Now that I know what a companion piece it is to the original movie, I'm really looking forward to double billing Candyman 92 and Candyman 2021. I think that'll be an absolute blast. I urge you, if you're a fan of the original Candyman, to let this story play out and tell itself in the way it wants to, without any preconceptions. Just know it's not a reboot, and then once you get to the end of it, you'll be able to decide, okay, I'm either high on having gone back to the cinema and being able to watch a horror movie on the big screen, or I speak the truth, and this is actually a really very well made, gorgeous looking, thoughtful, worthwhile addition to the Candyman myth. High on having gone back to the cinema and being able to watch a horror movie on the big screen,